Guys, welcome back to another episode of Real Talk with David. I'm here with my buddy Marcus, and I'm excited for you guys to get to know Marcus a little bit. And Marcus, down from Utah.
Yep, down for Utah.
Did you get in today?
Yesterday. Flew in yesterday morning. Every time I come to Arizona, it's like back-to-back meetings, meet my team, meet other people, and then I fly out tomorrow. Get back home.
Are you from Utah originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Utah, and then why I have roots here is in 2009. I do primarily investor transactions. That's like been my focus my whole career in real estate, 23 years. Well, when the market crashed, it crashed a lot harder here in Arizona than it did in Utah. And so 2009, picked up, sold everything I owned in Utah, came down here and started getting after it.
Wow. Yeah. Did you have a family at that point, or was it just you?
No. So it was interesting. At first, I was exploring the market. So I would drive down here Sunday night, leave my family in Utah. I have 4 daughters. At the time, I had 3 very young daughters. I would drive down Sunday night, chase properties all day, all week long, drive back to Utah Friday night, spend Saturday and Sunday at home, and then turn right back. And finally my wife was like, all right, we'll go with you. And she said, I'll give you 2 years max in Arizona. We moved down here, loved it, kept building our businesses. I still have my businesses here. We were down here for 6.5 years. And then that's when the opportunities in Utah showed back up for me. And now I go back and forth.
Cool, man. Yeah. So when you were driving down here and like doing that, were you just like driving for dollars, or like what was it, REO? What were you doing in that space at that point?
Yeah, so at that time, the REO market was going gangbusters. So it was an interesting evolution because at first I was buying homes off the courthouse steps. You know, I'd show up down there and was chasing properties. Then I noticed more and more investors got in the game, and the margins got slimmer and slimmer, but the risk was still high. So then I shifted it. I shifted my tactic at that point where I would be on the courthouse step, but I wouldn't be the one to buy it. I would wait for the person to buy it, and then I'd follow them to the house, because when you buy a house you've never seen before, that's the first place you go, right? And so they drive to the house, and I'd follow them. They'd be like, hey, we already bought the house. I'm like, I know, I just want to see it with you. I want to see what I missed out on. If I loved the house, I'd be like, hey, how about just making $2,500 quick? I'll just buy it from you. And so I'd see the property and mitigate my risk a little bit that way. And then at that point, where I was actually finding better deals on the MLS than I was through the courthouse step and things like that, and just started buying that way. So
wow,
yeah.
Well, dude, thanks for. I mean, I know it's busy anytime you come into Arizona, like you said, and so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast, man, and hang out is we were in Nashville. Was that like a month ago now? Like,
man, it feels like it was months ago, but it was literally like 4 or 5 weeks ago.
But dude, like, and then last year we were on a boat. I think it was that last year we were on a boat in Havasu.
Yeah.
And
I think that was our first like interaction together. Like, I think we knew of each other, but then we showed up to teach at the same event in Havasu.
Yeah, and anytime we hang out, I always love our conversations, and I really think that you have like a lot of creative thoughts about the industry, and so yeah, I think that we're clearly in a time in the industry where there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of flux, there's a lot of fear, and I just think it's interesting to kind of get everyone's take on the different things. So like, what are you doing? What are you doing now then? So you have a team here in Arizona, and then what's going on in Utah?
Yeah, so I several different things. So here in Arizona, I still have my real estate team, my property management company. I'm doing a development of duplexes down here right now that I'm building for my own portfolio. In Utah, I own my market centers, my KW market centers, and then I own title company, mortgage company, Exec Assist, which is a virtual assistant supply company. And then my real passion project, besides my own investing and things like that, is my podcast, The Whole Enchilada.
The Whole Enchilada?
Yeah.
How long have you been doing that?
Yeah. The Whole Enchilada, a couple of years, and no, it's not a Mexican cooking
I wish it was. Podcast. I told my wife 20 minutes ago I need a taco.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trust me, I eat my fair share of Mexican food. But that's like the first comment I get is I either get, is it about Mexican food? And the other one I get is there's a famous mountain biking trail called the Whole Enchilada in Utah that I get questioned about.
Okay.
But like, just quickly, the premise behind that is I feel like in our industry, and it's true for every industry, is somehow we start putting people on a pedestal for what they're doing in one avenue of their life. But then if you look at everything else in their world, a lot of times it's in shambles. And like, to me, it's hard for me to celebrate someone that's like crushing life in one area, but just leaving a wake of destruction in every other aspect of their lives. And so on the other side of that is we talk about living a balanced life. And I feel like people have misconstrued the idea of a balanced life, meaning mediocrity across everything. Like, be okay with just being mediocre in everything. And to me, that's not what a balanced life is. I truly believe you can live an elevated life in every aspect: physical fitness, spirituality, personal relationships, and business. But it just takes the same principles it takes to crush one aspect as the same principles it takes to crush all of them. You just have to be equally purposeful on all those platforms. That's where the name The Whole Enchilada comes from.
Okay, so I didn't think we were going to go this direction per se, but I'm super passionate about it because as some of my listeners may know, like one of the reasons why I took a break from podcasting in 2023 was just transparently, like I was one of those people crushing it in certain areas and like just letting things fall apart in other areas. And it was really this like watershed moment in or I shouldn't call it a moment. It was like a watershed year in my life where I had to go back and actually challenge the premise that you just said. Like, can someone truly have it all?
Yeah.
Can I balance this? Can I be an elite father and husband and business owner and creative thinker? Like, can I do all that? Mm-hmm. And I have a lot of thoughts about that, but like, why do you believe that that's possible, Mark?
Yeah. And I think it's, to be clear, I don't believe like there's no way to have it all. There's no way to know it all. There's no way to do it all. But what I can do is clearly define my life by design and have that. Cause like there's things that I have no desire to know how to like be a mechanic and build an engine from nothing to a full functioning engine, right? That's something I can leverage in my world. So that's something I could know, but I choose not to because doesn't play into like, what is my life by design? So when we say, can you do it all? The thing is I think most of us don't take the time to say, we talk about, I want a life by design, but when have you really slowed down to say, let me design my life?
When you've actually designed it.
Yeah. And once you do that, I think you can start defining like, okay, great relationships, like a great relationship with my wife looks like this. Wealth building. I talk a lot about wealth building. I just taught a class about wealth building down in another office earlier today. And one of the big things I lead out with, people expect me to show up of like, this is my crypto strategy. This is this. And I'm like, no, none of that matters until you understand what is a life, your personal mission, vision you're trying to accomplish. And then working into like really for you to create that, what is your freedom number? Like, what does it cost? What is the amount of money and time that you need to create in your world to live that life? And then you start stacking the wealth building principles, time management principles, and you can build a skill set to match that, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And a lot of what you just said resonates with me because one of the words that I found myself and still find myself sometimes using is intention and being intentional. And that's when we talk about building a life by design, really a lot of it falls back on being intentional with actually sitting down and conversing with the people that matter in that particular business or personal relationship that it would take to draw out, paint me a picture. Yeah. And for me, like it's easy, and I don't know if you felt like this or if you're listening, you felt like this, but like it's easy sometimes to parrot those things and then just not do it for yourself. Yeah. So I mean, a lot of that resonates, man.
Real quick on that, I think it's interesting, and I appreciate you sharing with me like you found yourself in that pocket too, because I almost feel like for that, I wish this wasn't true, but I almost feel like the people that have really learned that lesson had to almost find themselves at the bottom of the barrel and in a moment of despair. Because it wasn't one day I was just like, oh, I want to elevate my life and do these things. It was like there were moments of clear, like from an outside perspective, people would look at me and say like, man, he's crushing his goals. Let's ask him advice. And it was a challenge for me for people to like want to come to me for all those things because that's what they perceive. But inside I was like, why am I not happy? Like what? I should be thrilled with what's going on. And it's like, so I wish I had the formula, and I don't have it. I wish I had the formula to help people avoid that moment of despair, being like, wait, is there more to life than just chasing this? Before they go through, like, sounds like you went through it too, of be like, oh, let me rethink this. Let me rethink through what's important to me.
But I don't think I think the formula, I think that it's like, it's almost that, I forget what the book's called, but it's like, almost like the obstacle is the way. Yeah. Right?
It's by like Ryan Holiday, which his trio right there is an incredible book.
That's the Stoic guy, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. I knew it sounded familiar. Okay. So like, but that, and I think that there is something to that. I think in life, like that, everyone has to go through that, and it's going to look like something different for everyone. And yet you get to that rock bottom, whatever that is for you. And there's a fork, and there's a path, and there's a direction forward, and we get to choose what we do with that.
Yeah.
Like on that note, like as someone who's a high achiever, someone who's succeeded a lot, I'm curious, like what was maybe a moment in your life or business where, you felt like a failure, but like it was like that thing that propelled you to that next level of elevation. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's funny. I had a similar question earlier today. I had someone grab me after I taught this class and ask me this, and it's an experience I actually had when I was living here in Arizona, and it was one of those moments where every day people would knock on my door at my office asking for advice. How are you doing this? What does that look like? And in a lot of ways that you'd think that would feed your ego, where you're walking around like, look what I've done. At that time, I had no gray hair, so I would wear a tie.
You wear your gray hair well, though, bro.
I'd wear a tie to work for validity, since I didn't have gray hair at the time, right? So, but I also had a little ritual for myself, because I have to create little systems for me to live by. It's just like I'm very ritualistic that way. For me, when I would drive home to my house, in my driveway, I'd take my tie off before I went in the house as a trigger to myself of like, all right, you're not boss or work Marcus right now, you're dad Marcus. And so I would walk through the door ready to be who my kids and my wife needed me to be. And I remember that particular day, I drove home, and I might be giving a longer story than you want, but I pulled into my driveway, pulled my tie off, but I didn't get out of my car. And I just sat there for a minute. I was like, what is wrong with me? I'm like, in a lot of ways, I'm surpassing, even when I set out in business, I'm doing better than I thought I ever would. Why do I feel this way? Like I should be. I almost was mad at myself for how I felt in that moment. And I had this little memory pop into my mind of the first couple of weeks I had joined KW. I went to a class, and someone presented the idea of your big why, right? And we hear people talk a lot about, you need to understand your big why. You need to understand what it is. The idea of it resonated with me. However, because I'm a high achiever and super fast paced, I remember going, oh, that makes sense to me. Then the instructor said, who in the room has a big why? Someone raised their hand, and he said, what is it? And he said, my family. And I was like, oh, I have one of those. I guess that's my big why. And that was an aha moment for me, sitting in the driveway with my tie off, where I was just like, I haven't done the work. I haven't really thought through, what is my purpose on this planet? What am I business isn't just about chasing the dollars, it's about people. But to what end? What impact am I trying to have around me? And so I had my assistant cancel my appointments for the next couple of days. And all I did was journal. And I got out, at that time I wasn't very digital based. I got out one of those big yellow pads, and I just started writing, why am I doing this? Well, why do I do that? Why is that important to me? And I just was like a 2-year-old kid, kept asking why. And then over a couple of days of just writing, 3 specific patterns kept showing up. And those three patterns became the 3 buckets of my personal mission vision statement. And that is part of my personal affirmation every day, that I go through my personal mission vision statement. And as long as those 3 buckets are being filled, that's what propels me forward and keeps me excited. So almost always when I'm talking about wealth building or anything out of people, I always start first with how clear are you on your personal mission vision statement? Because all of the plans, the things that you want to talk about don't really matter unless you really know the destination of what you're trying to create.
What are your 3 buckets?
So the 3 buckets to my personal mission vision statement is, the first one I call myself, I'm a bridge builder. And what I mean by that is I'm really passionate about helping people get clarity on what they want to accomplish, which is the far side of the bridge. And then the other side of the bridge is reality. What's your current situation? Where are you really? Let's have a real open, honest discussion about where you're at. If you know those 2 points, building a bridge is just a combination of building the right skill systems, models, tools, relationships to build the bridge between the 2. So that's the first bucket. The second one is, I call myself an empire builder. I just love building businesses. There's just something fun for me to see a need in a marketplace. Even in the market now, so many people are sitting in uncertainty. In fact, for me, I'm like, ooh, there's a lot of uncertainty, which means there's a lot of opportunity. How do I build businesses and structure things in a way to fill the need for not only myself, but for my employees, my leaders, the consumer, my allied resources within that bucket. Then the third bucket that's really important to me is, I call myself an adventurer. If I don't have the next adventure on the books of where I'm going, what mountain I'm climbing, something along those lines, then I go a little crazy. So I love as long as I'm filling those 3 buckets, I'm good to go.
I love that. And it transcends like any one relationship or, I've always pushed on people when I'm coaching them that your big why, it has to persist if the person or the object was taken away. Right. And so like just to say like, I don't ascribe to this idea that your family can be your big why.
Yep.
Right. Like, because, or my wife or my kids, because what happens when those things are taken away? Like, I don't cease to exist. Yep. I don't cease to have purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've got to think and do the work. And I love that because you've now developed buckets that can apply. How am I adventuring with my wife, my kids, my business partners? How am I building bridges with my wife, my kids, my business partner, right? So it transcends any one relationship, which I do think leads to a more like full life.
That's right. Yeah.
Dude, I don't get to have a lot of like deep conversations with other brokerage owners. And obviously, like when I mentioned that we were in Nashville a while back, like we were in the room with mostly like brokerage leaders. And I don't know, in this moment, like there is a lot of uncertainty, but it's also exciting, I think, as a brokerage leader that like there's some opportunity if you're willing to really put your head down and buckle down and work and think creatively. Yeah. Where do you see biggest opportunities right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was met with one of my teams in my companies, a week ago, and the illustration that I kind of had them visualize, I said, hey, look, we're on a road right now, our industry, that's just, there's a ton of uncertainty in it. And it's interesting because really anyone that's been in this industry over the last decade, really, there hasn't been a lot of uncertainty. It's been like, even from an investment game, it's like, buy this property, it's going to go up and you're going to make money. And if you put it on the market, it's going to
everyone's a genius listing agent and investor.
I don't want to discount how hard agents work, but it's been an easy game here for a minute if you're willing to put a little bit of work into it. But I think this road of uncertainty right now, it comes to a fork in the road. There's two paths that people can choose. From uncertainty, you can either choose to lean into fear, which is one of the forks, to go down this and approach it from I'm scared, I'm nervous, I don't know, which we see, it drives me nuts. I hear so much negativity from people right now. Like if I run into an agent, an entrepreneur, and just say like, how's business? If the first thing that comes out of their mind is it's negativity, it's hard, then you're stating the obvious, it's hard, but like, are you the person that's gonna make it about the fear? So if one path off that fork is fear, what's the other one? And I think this is one that we've got away from. At the opposite of fear in that scenario would be a path of curiosity. And I feel like most of us have really got away from being curious and really investigative and like what are the opportunities? How do we approach that? I mean, you've taught 6 personal perspectives, which is a great course on just helping think through things. And one of the 6 personal perspectives is learn for doing sake, not learn for learning's sake, right? And I think so many of us have got into this pattern of learning for learning's sake of, well, I'm reading this book because David said it was a good book. It may not be the thing I need in my world right now. I haven't spent the time being curious to choose I'm going to choose my input based on what I'm curious about in my world in alignment with my personal mission. Going back to personal mission vision, right? If I get clarity on like, what's my personal mission vision? What skill, habit, tool, relationship am I missing? If I'm missing that, what should I be curious about? If I'm curious about this and can solve that, what should be my input be from books, podcasts, friends, coaching, any of those things that will fill that gap and take curiosity into knowledge. And if it's knowledge, it pushes me down that path.
I think like hearing you use the word curious, it's interesting even that you like kind of framed it in the last decade, because if you go, obviously you and I both operate within a Keller Williams context, but I think this applies no matter what. If you go back to some of the original like trainings, whether it be 6 personal perspectives or just Diana and just these other coaching things, one of the first things I ever learned, like almost a decade ago, was come from curiosity. Yeah. And that was such a poignant just phrase. Yeah. It was always, everything in the brokerage was come from curiosity, come from curiosity, come from curiosity. And we almost developed at that time. I was out in Maine, but like we developed this culture around curiosity, which kept us out of victim mode, and it kept us on this path of pushing forward and finding the solution. So I think there is there's a lot to that, man. Yeah. So curiosity, big opportunity for us.
Yeah. So I think the right opportunity will be a little bit different for everybody, how they tackle it and approach it based on how their curiosity shows up. Like the couple things that I've spent a lot of time from a curious perspective on recently is I think like a lot of conversations going on with agents right now around the NAR settlement. What's the position of the buyer's agent? How are buyer agents going to get paid? And I'm like, yeah, those are questions, but let's get to the root. What is the really root of that issue? And to me, where that led me in getting curious was more, we're talking about the wrong thing. We need to go back and say, how is a consumer thinking today as opposed to how was a consumer thinking 5 years ago, 10 years ago? This is my 23rd year in real estate. And so the way the consumer was thinking and making decisions even 10 years ago, 20 years ago is significantly different than how a consumer is making decisions today. So somehow the way we're presenting our value, and I want to be clear of how we're presenting and articulating and delivering our value in the consumer's mind hasn't matched up with what they're paying. And it's not, notice I'm not saying we're getting paid inappropriately. In my mind, it's actually oppositely. I think we provide so much value that we're worth the amount of money we make generally. We just haven't done a good enough job of matching the consumer where they're at to help them understand the value and see the value the way they need to see it. And so like one of the things I've recently done is I went back and identified in my own journaling 6 ways the consumer used to think versus how they think now. And just that process of me journaling that out and thinking it out, of understanding the new way a consumer thinks, has helped me reapproach like now if I understand how the consumer's thinking, my consumer is thinking, can I solve the problem for them? And if I can solve a problem for them, they're willing to pay for it. So I think it's just a matter of getting curious and getting back to the root issue. And mostly what we're talking about in the news and the conversations, the water cooler talk, it's the easy thing to talk about. It's the victim thing to talk about. Well, let's get back and get curious about what's the root of it.
Yeah. Like, do you think the industry is consumer centric?
I think the industry is consumer centric. Like in the end, it's always going to be the consumer. The consumer's patterns are always going to drive any industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if we operate on this premise that everything will always go downstream to what keeps the consumer at the center of the transaction, like it shouldn't come as a surprise to us.
Yep.
Like the people who are still months into this acting surprised that like that change has occurred.
Yeah.
I guess those are the ones that I'm most like, frankly, shocked at.
Yeah.
Because like, especially agents who have been in like 2 or 3 different waves or cycles of the market where I'm like, this isn't new. Like it's not new for change to occur. But I think to your point, like we did have such, and I say this as someone who's only been in the industry for the 10-year run up.
Yep.
Like that's all the youngins knew in this business. So I can see from their perspective how it's uncomfortable or different, but like change always occurs. So like, what are we actually going to do about it?
Yep.
Dude, you're super plugged in to what different operators are doing and thinking on this front. So from a curious perspective, like what are some of the interesting like solutions and ways that, other colleagues that we know are thinking?
Yeah. So like one of the biggest ones that I'm focused on is I believe one of the ways the consumer is thinking differently is they want to put a lot more mental energy into choosing who their agent's going to be, and a lot of that is going to be based off of the longevity of consistent value that was delivered before they had the need. Because I think agents are going to get less opportunity if we don't do a better job of delivering value up front. We're going to get less chances at the kitchen table. We can't count on the kitchen table conversation for us to articulate our value. A lot of that value is going to be delivered before you get that opportunity.
That's a newer idea for me. So you're saying that you believe that a lot of the value is going to be conveyed prior to ever getting into the appointment, which is the reason I think that's like, I'm sitting here thinking about this and pondering this, is because so much of, even in my offices, I'm focusing the attention on the training of articulating the value at the table.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, what does that look like then?
So this is why I think this is interesting. Think about the consumer right now is getting more noise from the media about who we are than ever before. They always counted on us or their past experiences to articulate who we were and what value we bring to the table. But now the media, think about, and I'm just blanket stating these things just to be like really blunt and direct with the point. But you think about what the media is saying right now is, don't work with a buyer's agent. You overpay them. They don't do that much for you. You don't really need representation because there's a listing agent or whatever. There's these pretty broad statements that we know aren't true, but that's what the media is sending out there right now. So if the consumer is hearing that, and it now, statistically speaking, you saw some of these statistics in Nashville, is almost every consumer is saying, I am going to look at all my options the next time. Regardless of how good of experience I had last time, I'm going to look at all my options and make sure that I'm paying a fair value for it. Well, when I was in Minnesota having this conversation 2 weeks ago, I had an agent, a very experienced agent, raise his hand and be like, I already do that. When I'm at the kitchen table, like I break down exactly what I do every step of the way. And I was like, that's great. And the point I'm making is the way they're going to make the decision is whether you get a chance at the kitchen table or not. And so you think about the majority of the way that agents capture a buyer right now is they'll throw something out that says, hey, search for a home here. Well, they know how to search for a home. They already have access to that. The thing they don't know, they don't think about, oh, when I do buy a house, I'm going to have to get an inspection. And I don't know how to read an inspection. And I don't know what would be the things to worry about and the things not to. They don't think about that till they're in a transaction. But we need to go back in time a little bit and make sure like our social media conversations, our emails, our newsletters are outlining some of these things. Hey, here's the three pitfalls that the three biggest pitfalls I find in inspection reports and this is how I address them. Or this is how we negotiate contracts. Or, hey, I just took this course on negotiation. This is how it shows up for my clients. Each of those are dots that they need to connect beforehand. But by the time they need you, the dots say, I'm not very smart to do this without a great fiduciary. And of the 13 agents I know, this is the one that's connected all the dots for me. He's the one I want to take through the process with me.
Well, because the issue, and this was something that I think this came from Brian Bolero, 1,000 Watt agency. Yep. Great marketing agency. But the issue has always been centered on this find you a home, and that's never been the issue.
Yeah.
And his point in a particular talk that I was thinking of was, it's not about finding the home, it's about de-risking the deal. You don't pay me to find the deal, you pay me to tell you about the bad wiring, or connect me to the inspector that's going to tell me about the bad wiring, right? And so
great, yeah.
That, in being able to think through, if I'm an agent, how those various points, right? Like if we call it a 36 touch or drip campaign or whatever, how we're dripping those types of deposits of value, and that being the impetus of whether or not we get to the table the next time, is, I think that's cutting edge thinking for a lot of agents.
Yeah. And I love that term, de-risk. Like in my mind, I instantly go to this idea of thinking, all right, well, how do I put together a 5-part video series of the 5 biggest ways I de-risk the home buying process, right? Or like another one that I recently been working on for first-time home buyers is the way to catch a first-time home buyer isn't to be like, well, date the rate and whatever they say, right? Like they know rates are tough. But what's the real question for them? Is owning a home still American dream? Like in this world, is that still the American dream for you? That's what they're asking, is like, is it in the cards for me? Like, is that what I still should be pursuing? Like, how do we get to that route and put together this value conversation of let's figure it out together. But this is how I would approach it. Like, if we do that and we're the person that answers that question for them, when it comes time for them to chase the American dream, which I very much still believe owning a home is the American dream, you will be the person because you're the one that helped them determine, hey, it's not just the American dream, it's my dream.
So how do we as brokerage owners help our agents do this? like not just think this way, but like I'm always like, I feel like as a leader, like it really boils down to I can show someone how to do something or I can do it for them.
Yep.
And I'm constantly trying to weigh those out because I think often the mindset in some context is we just go to that old proverb of like, well, train someone how to fish and they'll have fish forever. Well, that's a reality of an era of time. Could it be that we are in a place where my consumer is agents, and so I'm thinking through like, okay, yeah, I can show them how to do it, or I can just go do that for them.
Yeah.
Like, do you feel like, am I on the right track with this idea of, if I believed what we just talked about, like finding solutions as a brokerage leader of helping do this for your people?
Yeah.
I don't know. Is that something that you would ascribe to? Is that
I believe this. I mean, the proverb you brought up is said all the time.
I don't even
right?
know if it's a proverb.
Well, whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Here's the truth: is I love fishing.
Okay.
It's a passion of mine. But guess what? I'm gonna go to sushi tonight with my team, and I didn't catch any of that fish. I'm gonna buy the fish. It's easier for me to show up at a sushi restaurant and be like, instead of me going out and catching fish tonight, I'm here for a different experience with my team. I'm gonna buy the fish. Although there's gonna be other times I go fishing for myself. So one of the 6 ways I identified earlier that a consumer is thinking differently, and for an agent, the buyer or seller is our consumer. For us, our customer is the agent, and it's no different. They're both consumers. And so the one of the things that I've identified is the consumer, whether it's true or not, believes that their experience is unique. Whatever they're going through is unique and personal to them. And what they want as a solution is not here's a box I've already put together and this is your solution. It's if they feel like their situation is unique, they want someone to deliver a unique solution that matches their unique scenario. And I think that's our response, either from an agent to a consumer and also from a brokerage owner to an agent, is there's going to be agents that say like, I do want to fish. Help teach me the principles that I can go do this. And then there's going to be the agent that be like, I know I'm not good at that, but what I can do is I can show up and be super charismatic and take them through the transaction or whatever. Can you solve that problem for me? Now, we can't be everything for everybody, but I think for your point, can we figure out 2 or 3 personalities of agents and business types of agents that we can be the solution to those 3 really well on a bigger scale? I think so. I
think it's like trying to figure out how can we, like for me, I've kind of been thinking through it of how can we provide the various tracks, but those tracks have to be in perfect parallel to each other, because in order to really, I believe, create a community and a culture that has sticking power, like those all have to be going in the same direction. So I have to be able to articulate why the fishing and the, hey, show up and I already have sushi method still go together, can coexist, if you will, and it gets us all further faster together. And you know, I think that's one reason why I'm really grateful that like the mix of most of my offices are so like, I mean, from 50 member teams down to the solo agent, down to the brand new solo agent. Like we have a really diverse mix. And then you throw in like expansion, everything else. So like are there other, actually, let me kind of just like completely veer left, because I want to pick your brain on the wealth building stuff in general. I actually, one of my conversations earlier, man, this is just testament to like stick to core competency, right? And so much of my portfolio is in real estate. And in 2023, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna dip my toe into e-commerce. And I friggin' losing my shirt in e-commerce, just to be honest. But it's been a good learning experience. It's been awesome. From a wealth building perspective, what are some things that in the current market reality, you're like telling those people like closest to you, like, hey, I've got eyes over here. I'm looking at this. I'm thinking like through this. You threw out like crypto strategy. So I'm not looking for like a silver bullet per se, but there's always new opportunities popping up. NVIDIA is gonna split tomorrow, right? So there's all kinds of stuff going on. What do you have your eyes on, your attention towards?
No, this is a great question. So I mean, you've probably seen in a pattern for me now is a lot of times I will ask myself, is my immediate knee-jerk question really the question I should be asking? And because I'm the same thing is one thing that drives me nuts more than anything is if I have dollars sitting in actual physical dollars or in the bank that's not out working, right? Because I have a responsibility for every dollar that comes into my world to give it its most power, which is in the best assets. And so like this thought process is going through my mind a lot right now of like, how do I give every dollar that I work so hard for the most power? How do I endow it with the most power possible? And something that is new that we have to consider is in a high inflationary market is thinking through what should be the mix of my portfolio that will maximize the returns or get the most power of these dollars in an inflationary market. So like, again, going back to curiosity, is now I'm spending a lot of my time thinking through historically in high inflation markets, what assets have done well versus which ones have struggled or stayed the same. Like if you look historically, the stock market in general after a inflationary peak, almost for a decade, remains pretty flat. Now, there's specific stocks and industries within the stock market that did well, but if you look at it on average, like most people are just trying to match the S&P 500 or Dow, there's a high likelihood that will be pretty flat for the next decade. But within, you brought up NVIDIA, it's looking at the AI and saying, do you believe AI will have a monster impact on every industry over the next 5-10 years? That stock may be worth pursuing. So it's thinking through like what, regardless of an inflationary market, how can you hedge against an inflation and put those dollars to work? So I am studying artificial intelligence. The other thing I've recently looked at is as a way of inflation is foreign investment. Historically speaking, the dollar has been in a world economy, the dollar has been stronger against every other currency. However, it's losing some of its power in relation to other currencies. And so I recently with some partners, we just bought 3,000 acres in Chile, in Patagonia, for a development down there, which I think is an inflationary hedge. I had a really great conversation with a brilliant investor the other day who's talking about, and it's so interesting because most people are against borrowing money at 7% interest rate, but actually debt is one of the best hedges against inflation. Because in an inflation, if you believe we're going to continue in an inflationary market, that means the right assets will go up, real estate will go up. In an inflationary market, rents will go up. But even at a 7% interest rate, if rates don't even go lower than that, then my payment stays the same. If I miscalculate and rates go down, then I can refinance, right? And still have an asset that's going to appreciate. And so that's from an investment standpoint, I'm looking a lot at that piece of it is thinking through my investment classes in relation to inflation. But I do think one of the best investment opportunities right now for entrepreneurs, particularly real estate agents, is one of the things the consumers want is they want to put energy into choosing a fiduciary, but then they want more from that fiduciary than they've ever had before. They don't want to interview an agent and choose an agent and then go interview a loan officer and choose a loan officer, then go interview a property and casualty insurance agent and pick that. They want to be like, okay, I exhausted my mental effort to choose you as my agent. Now really guide me through the process. And so this has been a big focus of mine is I've literally sat at the closing table thousands of times in my career. And every time I get paid as an agent, somebody gets paid at the mortgage company, somebody gets paid at the title company, all the way down to they're buying more candles at Bed Bath & Beyond. Wealth is transferring to Bed Bath & Beyond because of the transaction I triggered. So that's been a big focus of mine is saying if an agent is going to be the center of that transaction, they should have an equity ownership stake in title, mortgage, property and casualty insurance. We started a real estate fund called the Falcon Fund that gives an agent an opportunity to get into the real estate space. And so that's kind of where a lot of my focus is now is how do I create more opportunities for agents to build wealth without having to become a loan officer, which is so much risk associated with that, or become a property and casualty insurance agent and that kind of stuff.
Which is actually that's also a trend that's happening out there of the, going, and it's been there for a long time, but the whole become an LO, become these other things. I think that's one reason why you and I track so well is because I just couldn't agree more. My wife is in the luxury wedding space, and it just, I'm a very simple person. I'm not I'm not smart at all. I'm very simple. And so I just like look and try and recognize trends. And when we started thinking this way a few years back, around 7 years ago when I got in the industry, I started like having these types of ideas. And it all came from recognizing what was happening in her business, which was the planner was where everyone exhausted all the funds and money and then said, take it.
Yep.
And so I said, okay, there's all these like extremely wealthy people who are exhausting their energy to pick the one right person.
Yep.
And then expecting that person to go figure out all the rest.
Yep.
So it would follow to me that in other industries, especially things where, way higher asset class is on the line, right? That I would exhaust my energy at the trigger point and expect the person to go coordinate the rest of the deal.
Yep.
And so we too are operating under that same premise. It's like anything that touches real estate, there is revenue to be had there. And there's revenue if we're thinking from a consumer-centric and then as brokerage leaders, an agent-centric standpoint. I believe that if we can recapture that, we can provide a better consumer-centric experience, which then in turn gives us the ability to offer a better agent-centric experience.
I think that's a perfect example. Like you look at the wedding planner, if as soon as they choose the wedding planner to say, I trust you, you see my vision, I want you to deliver on this, well, then the wedding planner has to coordinate the florist, the caterer, the table and chairs, all those things. In the end, as long as the consumer feels like they're paying a fair price for the right stuff, they don't care if the wedding planner also has an ownership stake in the floral company, the table and chair company, the catering company. Like in a lot of ways, they'd be like, great, I want you to make more money. You're doing a great job for me. Go do it, as long as they don't feel like they're being taken advantage of.
Yeah. Make my life easier, simpler, and more beautiful.
Yep.
And we're good to go. Like
Yep.
we like that. And it's funny that like we kind of go full circle there, because then when we go back to the fear of the NAR settlement and everything like that, it's all around transparency, right?
Yep.
And so the crux of the issue, even in what we're talking about, is just around like we have to be able to articulate why we're making the consumer's life better through offering a service of this nature.
Yep.
Such that they win at a higher level. And if we can do that in a transparent nature, then okay, everyone's going to win.
That's right.
And so then we can stay curious about it. That's where the curiosity leads to, okay, here's opportunity.
Yep.
All right, so we could sit here and talk for a long time, and I think it's about time for us to go grab a beverage and talk some more.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up the episode, I want to ask you the same three questions I ask every guest.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
Is that seat getting hot?
It's toasty.
Who's been the most influential person in your business and why?
That's a tough question. My quick answer actually came as a surprise to me. Is my wife is not in business at all, and I discounted her. This sounds horrible, but I didn't discount. I didn't seek out her opinion in business a lot because it's not her world. However, over the last decade of my career, I've spent a lot more time sharing some of the issues I'm trying to solve in my business. And she brings such like a soft, unique perspective to it that it's just really changed the way I do business in a way that I didn't anticipate. So I'd actually say her right now, even though I've had some incredible mentors from the space that have helped make me who I am.
That's awesome. What's the most influential book in your business journey and why?
My all-time favorite book is The Motivation Manifesto. Which
Who's
is
that by? I've never read that or heard of it.
Brendan Bouchard. That's
a Bouchard book?
Yeah, it's
wow.
If like I basically highlighted the whole book. It's got so many I love words and the power of words. Just the way he puts these strings these words together just rang so true to my heart in a lot of ways that it's my favorite book. And then one that was very impactful at a critical moment in my career was The 4 Disciplines of Execution.
Yeah, some 4DX. I love it. Very cool. All right, I'm gonna have to check out that Bouchard book. I'm kind of on this point in my life right now with the busyness and kids and everything, where I'm like adopting this naval Ravikant idea of I'm just not finishing book.
I almost get that was my other book. That book is incredible. It's so thought provoking.
So I'll pick up Motivation Manifesto until I don't need it at the moment. The last question is I really want people out there, anyone that I touch, we talked about personal vision and mission a lot, and listeners of this show know that my personal mission is to unleash other people's potential so they can live big, joy-filled lives.
Yep.
Adopted an iteration of that around high school, and I think part of unleashing one's potential really it starts with taking action, just pushing the chips all in and taking action.
Yep.
So if you're talking to agents out there in this market, they're trying to come from a place of curiosity, but they're fearful. They need to take action. What is the action that you'd encourage them to take?
It goes really along with what we were talking about today. I would say that if you can't stand in front of a room of your peers, let's say that your 100 closest peers are in a room with you, if you wouldn't feel comfortable standing in front of them with your personal mission vision statement up on the wall and being like, guys, I want to be vulnerable with you. This is who I am. This is what I'm about. If you that means that to me is you haven't flushed out your personal mission vision statement enough. And I think if we haven't done that, it's pretty hard to maximize your potential. You're doing a disservice not only to yourself, you're doing a disservice to your family, to the consumer, to your kids. If you want to be a leader, even if it's self-leadership, get clarity on what's important to you and what you're all about.
Love that. This has been a fun conversation. I think listeners will want to check out the whole enchilada. And so what's the best way for people to get connected with you?
Yeah, so what I'd really love is if you enjoyed this conversation, come follow me on my podcast. It is The Whole Enchilada. There is another Whole Enchilada out there that is about Mexican cooking. It's not that one, but The Whole Enchilada, we're on all major platforms, or you can go find us at thewholeenchilada.biz.
Awesome, man. This is fun. I'm sure we'll do it again. Guys, this has been another episode of Real Talk with David. As always, please leave us a rating on your platform of choice. I'm excited about so many of the guests that I've got coming up this season on the podcast. And with that, go take action and play all in.